On today's show, we check in with the top 10 picks of the 2024 NHL Draft, including Macklin Celebrini and Ivan Demidov.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USHL scout over at Elite Prospects, and today we have an exciting show for you all where we're going to be checking in with the top 10 picks of the 2024 NHL Draft and looking at how their D+1 seasons have gone. In the first segment, we're going to be looking at the big top three, Macklin Celebrini, Artyom Levshunov, and Beckett Sennecke. Then in the second segment, we're going to have to skip over Cayden Lindstrom a little bit because he's been injured all season long, unfortunately, before continuing with Ivan Demidov, Tij Iginla, and Yakemchuk. And in the final segment, we're going to be wrapping up the show with Berkly Catton, Zayne Parekh, and Anton Silayev. These are the 10 prospects that we'll be focusing on today. I hope that you are enjoying your days. And before we dive fully into the show today, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So let's jump into the episode here by starting off with the big three names, the players that got picked in the first three slots of the 2024 NHL Draft. And starting off with the player that was going to be going first overall in this draft all year long in his draft cycle. There was really not much doubt. And when the San Jose Sharks stepped up to the podium to select Macklin Celebrini, every single person at the Sphere in Las Vegas knew what was coming. And Celebrini has not been disappointing whatsoever in his rookie season. Not only does he have 40 points in 45 games with the San Jose Sharks this year, including 17 goals in that span, which I really don't think it can be overstated how impressive that is on a team like the San Jose Sharks. He's second in scoring among Sharks this season behind only the recently traded away Mikael Granlund, who had 45 points in 52 games with San Jose. But Celebrini has his 40 points in just 45 games. So the point per game rate has been very good with him. But beyond just the score sheets and what we see on the stat line, what Celebrini's been bringing at the NHL level is incessant pace, incredibly refined habits on both sides of the puck. The intensity has been there night in, night out. And beyond that, this has immediately become one of the most dynamic transition attackers in the entire league. Celebrini isn't just a really speedy, intelligent center. He is explosive from a standstill, and he reads defenses so well. He's constantly finding gaps. He has a lot of these nuanced patterns in his rushes off puck. And when he gets the puck from a teammate, he's already at speed and attacking a really uncomfortable gap for defenders much of the time. He's difficult to contain off the rush. And to be doing this as a pure 18-year-old this season, he's only turning 19 on June 13th in the summertime when this season's over. I mean, I don't think that the San Jose Sharks are going to be playing hockey by the time that his birthday rolls around this year, but I don't think it's going to be taking many more seasons for San Jose to be able to put up playoff runs, because this is the kind of player to build a team around, and he has been fantastic, lights out good this season. So solid defensively, a true three-zone force. He's constantly working off puck, and in terms of just the on-puck game, the howitzer shot and the one-timer on the power play is a really big weapon. He loves to camp at that right top of the right circle. And I mean, last season, he got a decent amount of practice with Lane Hudson on his team at Boston University in terms of just hammering very accurate, quick passes into his wheelhouse. And he hasn't been getting quite the same level of feeds this season in San Jose from the point on the power play, but still he's been really difficult to contain on the man advantage. And He has those physical tools, that middle drive, that intensity, that intelligence to be really dangerous at even strength as well. In his last 10 games with San Jose, he has 4 goals and 8 points. He's been a consistent scorer all season long, and he's been playing true top line minutes. Over the last 10 games, he has exceeded the 21-minute mark 3 times in his last 5 games, all of those actually. And he's playing a really big role on this team. And I think that any single fan of the game of hockey could use to tune into the San Jose Sharks just to watch Macklin Celebrini play hockey, because it is a joy when he's on his game, which has been most of the games he's played this year. Moving on to number 2, and we have a player that I know a lot of the fan base that drafted him is a little bit frustrated with this season, and that's Artyom Levshunov of the Chicago Blackhawks, who's been playing in the AHL with the Rockford Ice Hogs this season. 6'2", 209-pound right shot defenseman. He's a good skater, gets around the ice well, and he's been showing his physicality and aggressiveness both with and without the puck throughout the season this year. But the number of mistakes that have come back to bite not only him but his team this season have also been really quite notable. There's been a lot of iffy performances in the AHL this year. I think this was a very big jump in terms of quality of competition for this player. Again, this is a player that I think something I've mentioned a lot on the podcast and in writing as well, is that he hasn't been able to find much consistency in his team year to year. He has switched teams every single year now for the last 4 seasons, going from Team Belarus U18 to the Green Bay Gamblers in the USHL to Michigan State University in the NCAA, and now the Rockford Ice Hogs in the AHL. He hasn't really been able to find that rhythm with this particular team, and I think that keeping him at Michigan State University this year would have been the play, even though he had 35 points in 38 games last year and he was a dominant force in the NCAA. I still think he had a lot to learn, not only on the ice in terms of when to take his risks, when to activate offensively, and when he really has to prioritize his own defensive position, but off the ice as well. This is a guy who was learning English in his year in the USHL and was taking some obviously college classes at Michigan State University. Was growing his English there and working extremely hard off the ice. He was always the first player on in the gym or at the training rink and the last player to leave. And I think that keeping him in that environment for another year would have been rather beneficial for his development. But that is not what Chicago decided. Instead, he's playing in the AHL. And while he has had some growing pains and there have been mistakes along the way, I also don't think that this has been a tire fire like perhaps some Chicago fans on Twitter especially fear it is. 21 points in 47 games is not bad offensive production. 59 penalty minutes, I think, shows that he's been chasing the play a little bit at this level. But still, I think that this is a player with a lot of upside in terms of his defensive flashes. It's not overly consistent, especially at the pro level at this point, but there really is a foundation to work from in terms of the defensive game with this player, the aggressiveness, the physicality, the ability to box players out from the net front, his mobility and be able to match footwork off the rush really closely. He can keep like a suffocatingly close gap and also disguise when he's going to lunge for the puck with a blow poke check. He's a player with a lot of nuance in his defensive game, and beyond just that, I think offensively as well, there's room to grow. I don't think this is a player that's ever going to be a 60-point guy from the blue line in the NHL. I'm not convinced he's going to be a first pairing defenseman in the NHL either. I think there's a possibility he's a number 2, especially if Chicago's able to land a guy like Matthew Schaefer at the draft this year. But we're going to see how his development continues, but Levshunov is a very intriguing player that I think deserves some more patience, because he was still quite raw in his draft year and far from a finished product, and bringing him directly to the AHL, I think, rushed him a little bit. But a point of positive, even though he only has 21 points in 47 games this season, 9 of those have come in the last 10. He's heating up offensively and he's warming up, and I think that he's going to really show why he was a top 5 pick in due time. Second overall, perhaps a little bit rich, but top 5, I think, was most certainly the range for this player. Moving on, Beckett Sennecke of the Oshawa Generals, picked by the Anaheim Ducks with likely the best ever reaction to being drafted into the NHL that we've seen on the big screen. Sennecke has been lights out fantastic at the OHL level this season. 6'4", 194-pound right wing power forward, and he has been using his elite level hands and high end creativity, and also just two-way ability and intensity and physicality to dominant effect this season with Oshawa. He has a lot of points this season, 81 in 49 games, 36 goals in 49 games. That is good for him to sit ninth in total league scoring, and he's also played about 8 to 10 less games than most of the players he's competing with in those slots. 1.65 points per game is among the better ones league-wide as well. There aren't that many players that are above him. I mean, the one notable storyline in the OHL at the moment in terms of point per game is, of course, Igor Chernyshov of the San Jose Sharks, who has an absurd 12 goals and 32 points in 12 games since returning from injury for 2.67 point per game average, which should not be human. But Beckett Sennecke has really been exploring his offensive game this season. I've loved the progression in terms of him being able to layer his physicality and violence as well into his on-puck situations. I think last year is perhaps a little bit more separated in terms of the violence and the soft skill on puck. You saw a lot of violence in terms of his forechecking and his off-puck implications, but on puck, he was going a lot more for those dangles and avoiding contact rather than going through opponents. That's been happening a bit more often this season, which is very exciting if you're an Anaheim Ducks fan. This is an extremely fun player to watch. So much skill. He can get fans out of their seats on a nightly basis. And while third overall was definitely higher than most people had him ranked last year at the draft, he has enough skill to make that draft slot more than worthwhile. Even if a player like Ivan Demidov remained on the board, which I know a lot of Ducks fans were perhaps a little bit bitter about on draft day, I think that is fading a little bit now, even with how good Demidov's been in the KHL this year. Beckett Sennecke is a real unicorn kind of player with his violence and deft skill and creativity and dynamic upside in a 6'4" power forward frame. Those players don't come around every draft, and when they do, they go about this high on draft day. But that wraps up this first segment. In the next one, we're going to be running through picks 4 to 7. Quick word on Cayden Lindstrom, and then Ivan Demidov, Tij Iginla, and Carter Yakemchuk are getting our attention. But first, a quick message from our sponsors. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for an even bigger payout, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game very, very exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a late three, I never feel like I've missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's keep this episode rolling in the second segment, starting with Cayden Lindstrom of the Columbus Blue Jackets, a player who has unfortunately not dressed for a single game this season, and we are still unsure when he's going to be back or whether he's going to be back at all this year before next campaign. But it's been difficult to watch with how these injuries have affected him since his draft year and the amount of time that he's missing. But 6'4", 214-pound left shot center with so much violence on the ice, a ridiculous amount of shooting ability, and beyond that, he's also just a pure power forward with a lot of handling and playmaking skill to boot. A lot to like in this player, but he's still quite raw and he's going to need a couple seasons to develop, especially now having missed his entire D+1 campaign. But moving on to 5th overall, where the Montreal Canadiens drafted Ivan Demidov to the delight of the Habs fans present at the Sphere in Las Vegas. And of course, very, very theatrical with the announcement of Céline Dion. But Demidov has been as advertised this season in the KHL, especially ever since the Montreal Canadiens front office made that visit to St. Petersburg, where ever since then he's been getting a lot more ice time, a lot more trust, and has been scoring a lot more, especially with those power play opportunities. He's up to 19 goals and 47 points in 57 KHL games this season, which is the best ever D+1 production or U19 production in KHL history, surpassing Kirill Kaprizov. This has been a ridiculously good season. 11 points in the last 10 games. He's been the playmaking fulcrum for St. Petersburg ever since he's been a consistent top six presence, just constantly attacking from various angles at various paces, constantly layering in shoulder fakes and head fakes, looking off the wrong way, going with no-look passes. He's so creative and finds such ways of getting the puck to dangerous areas that defenses don't even see that coming as the third most likely option, let alone the thing that he's trying to do primarily. He's a very deceptive player, and that's been so difficult for KHL defenders this season. He looks primed for a top six spot in Montreal's lineup next season. The skill, the intelligence, the pace, it's all already there, I think. The skating is rather unique, especially with his utilization of the 10-2 maneuver in terms of only staying on his inside edges and going for those lateral shifts. And it's allowed him to really be very escapable in tight and find weird ways of getting out of pressure that more conventional skaters wouldn't be able to access. This season in the KHL, he's been a lot more selective with his utilization of that ability as well, which has made it a lot more effective, in my opinion, too. So a player who's progressing, he's improving the things he's already been great at. His motor, his intensity have been real points of strength. The defensive game definitely could still use some work. He's not a high-end defensive thinker as of yet, but still a player who has that effort level and that desire to make an impact on the defensive side of the puck. And I think that's going to be more than enough for the Montreal Canadiens to work with. At number 6, the Utah Hockey Club selected Tij Iginla, a player that I loved in his draft year. I believe I ranked him 5th overall on my board, so 6th overall was definitely within the range I thought he should go. He's unfortunately been out with injury since November 30th with the Kelowna Rockets. His last game was a 1-goal, 5-point performance when his partner in crime, Andrew Crystal, was still on the team before he got dealt to the Spokane Chiefs to combine with Berkly Catton instead, who we'll get to in a second. But Tij Iginla is a player who this season, 14 goals, 32 points in 21 games. The scoring has been there when he's been healthy, and the intensity, the board battle ability, the proficiency at getting the puck from boards to the middle of the ice with accuracy, the playmaking ability is, I think, really underrated because the shot is just so vicious and so obviously a massive tool for him. But the playmaking, I think, has a lot of runway as well at the NHL level. And combining with guys like Logan Cooley and Dylan Guenther, I think is going to be fantastic for this player long term. And I think he's the perfect complement for those two guys specifically. Maybe you could throw in Clayton Keller, but I think the combination of power forward, playmaker, and sniper that you'd have with Cooley, Iginla, and Guenther would be a very, very fun combination to look at long term. Still a player I think is more than deserving of his slot at 6th overall. And I think that Utah Hockey Club fans should be very excited for a future with this player in the lineup. He's going to be a fan favorite from day one with just how hard he works and the amount of dangerous offensive chances he's at the middle of creating, whether it be through his skill, his pace, his playmaking, or just his shot, or just crashing the crease and the net front without regard for his own bodily health. This is a guy that puts everything on the line for his team, and that's going to gain him a lot of fans within the team, within the lineup, among the coaching staff, management, and fan base alike. But finally, for this segment, we have Carter Yakemchuk, the 7th overall selection by the Ottawa Senators, who's been playing with the Calgary Hitmen this season. one of the final cuts in camp with the Senators, to the shock of many scouts, a player who stuck around and delivered some really good performances in preseason. His first couple were fantastic before he came back down to earth a little bit and showed the flaws and the gaps in his game that still remain. But this is a guy that a 6'4", 207-pound right shot defenseman, ridiculously good shot. He's highly creative offensively. Some of the best hands I've seen from a defensive prospect in years. And he is never shy of using that or trying to dissect defenses with that ability. Last season, he had 30 goals and 71 points in 66 games. This season, it's dropped down a little bit, at least in terms of the goal scoring, to 16 goals and 44 points in 45 games with the Calgary Hitmen in the WHL. He's still a player that loves his physicality, goes for big hits, takes some penalties. Last year had 120 penalty minutes. This year, 61 is a bit better, but still a guy that finds himself in the penalty box quite regularly. That said, I think Ottawa Senators fans know exactly why they should be excited for this guy, especially when you could pair him with a player of the caliber of Jake Sanderson, who I think the rest of the hockey world was reminded of just how good he was with his call up to the USA team at the Four Nations face-off. Senators fans see this night in, night out. This is one of the better defensemen in the entire NHL already. I don't think it should be controversial to call him a top 15 defenseman league-wide at this stage already in his development. And his defensive intelligence, his mobility, his ability to cover so much ground and make up ground against odd man rushes, I think would also be really big in terms of insulating the risk associated with Carter Yakemchuk and the turnovers that come with his aggressive offensive style of play. So I think a guy like Jake Sanderson is going to be a great complement to Carter Yakemchuk down the line. Still think he needs about another year and a half, 2 years to develop into a consistent NHLer, but I also had my doubts about that being an even longer stretch at the draft, and considering how well he performed in training camp, maybe my skepticism is coming into question here, but still a player I still think has some gaps in his defensive game and could use another year to develop, but ideally in the AHL. But that wraps up this second segment. In the final one, we're going to wrap up the show with Berkly Catton, Zayne Parekh, and Anton Silayev. 3 interesting prospects that have had really interesting years this season in their D+1 campaigns. Berkly Catton especially. He has 31 points in his last 10 games. We're going to dive into that and a whole lot more after these messages from our sponsors. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, the Stanley Cup, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor the coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage for up to $5 million. No medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you would think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. Go to selectquote.com/lockedonnhl today to get started. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. All right, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment, kicking it off with Berkly Catton of the Seattle Kraken playing with the Spokane Chiefs in the WHL, a 5'10", 174-pound left shot center who is just so speedy, so creative, high-end puck handler, high-end playmaker, and a really dominant transition attacker. He's at his best, at his highest paces, and he has already crossed the 100-point mark on the season in just 47 games. That's 34 goals and 66 assists in 47 games this season. That 1 assist performance in 5 games at the World Junior Championships with Team Canada, I think You can probably base that on what Team Canada was and how they were put together and the lack of practices that they were afforded. But Berkly Catton's been lights out in the WHL, and that has been ramped up to 13 ever since Andrew Crystal was acquired from the Kelowna Rockets. And just to read you through some of the stat lines in his last couple games: 3 assists, 2 points, 5 points, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points, 2 points, 3 points, 5 points, 3 points, 2 points. You get the gist. He's scoring pretty much every single game. The last game where he didn't score was his first game back from the World Junior Championships, the first game he played with Andrew Crystal, and he followed up that lukewarm performance with a 7-point display. This is a player that, with his pace, with his intensity, but mainly with that skill and creativity just popping out of the seams, has exploded with a player that can not only think the game at his level, but matches his pace and creativity and off puck routes that are very difficult for your average WHL player to read and anticipate. But these two players have been combining to that degree this season. It has been an absolute joy to watch. I mean, in his last 10 games, Berkly Catton is a plus 16. I know we want to retire the plus minus stat, but that is an absurd rate. And he is the player, I think, Seattle Kraken fans are deservedly very, very, very excited for. He's going to complement the defensive two-way impact of guys like Matty Beniers and Shane Wright exceptionally well. I'm just looking forward to when they're able to bring in a sniper to really complement those other skill sets. But let's move on now to the next player, and that is Zayne Parekh of the Saginaw Spirit, the 9th overall selection of the Calgary Flames in the 2024 draft. And what else to say about Zayne Parekh apart from just ceaselessly dynamic offense and a player that is exactly what Team Canada missed at the World Junior Championships, who can light things up from the blue line and create from the blue line. That's something that Canada just lacked after Matthew Schaefer went down with injury. And Zayne Parekh has 28 goals and 86 points in 52 games this season. That is right. You heard that correctly. He's 8th in OHL scoring in terms of point per game. He is 7th in total OHL scoring this season. And he also has 77 penalty minutes. Something that I think often goes under the radar with Zayne Parekh is that this is a chippy player. He's not afraid to cross the line in terms of legality on the ice, in terms of stick checks, cross checks. He's a nippy player, and he's not fun to play against. You get bruised up and battered playing against Zayne Parekh, even if he's not going to physically dominate you. He's a player that will get underneath your skin, and he's been showing that in the OHL with Saginaw this season, that he is real pain to play against, and on a very consistent basis, that is the case. Especially now also with the addition of Igor Chernyshov to this absolutely dominant Saginaw Spirit team that already won the Memorial Cup last season. This is the ideal situation for Zayne Parekh to flaunt his offensive skills, and I think that this should be the last season that he is in the OHL, because there is just not much left for him to learn at this level. Jump to the NHL is going to be a big one, but I think that he's going to follow a little bit in the steps of a player like Lane Hutson in terms of making that transition look rather smooth because of a high degree of intelligence, really, really good motor and feet, and a dynamic creativity for creation in the offensive zone and the ability to run a power play at the NHL level from day one. But to wrap up the show here at 10th overall, from the New Jersey Devils and Torpedo Nizhny Novgorod in the KHL, we have Anton Silayev, the towering 6'7", 209-pound left shot defenseman, has been a really good player in the KHL in recent months and weeks. His performances have really stabilized. His production hasn't jumped off the page. 11 points in 52 games isn't all that dissimilar to his 11 points in 63 games from last season, but he's been playing more stable hockey this campaign. Just to give you a quote from a game report from our Russian scout Dylan Griffin from January 30th of this year, he said that this is one of the best viewings I've had of Silayev to date. He's clearly taking a step forward with his snap decision-making, pre-scanning on pass receptions and retrievals to find one-touch passing outlet, and simplifying his passing game. When he takes that extra second to check for a secondary option, the panic set in and led to a couple of bad passes and near turnovers. Risk assessment remains a scary aspect of his game. but it has taken some real steps over the course of this season. I think it's clear this is a player that still has some of the clear weaknesses from last year, and especially like Dylan noted, in terms of the decision making under pressure with the puck on his stick. But defensively, the range, the mobility, the physicality, those three dominant assets have really combined well with a growing defensive awareness and situational awareness, especially, as well as defensive composure. This is a player who I think is continuing to progress and trend to become a top four defenseman in the NHL. Definitely still has some development to go, and there's definitely a lot of logjam in on the blue line in New Jersey. I'm not 100% sure that it's going to be there that he sets himself through, but still a guy that with his very unique profile and elite level feet at his size, which just you don't find every 3 years, let alone every draft. It's a very unique profile, and I still completely understand why a team took a swing on him in the top 10. And that I think is very much the range where he should have been like ranked all season long in his draft year campaign. If you remember correctly, this is a player that was ranked second overall, almost as a contender for first overall at the midseason point of the draft. That I never quite saw in his profile. However, 10th overall in terms of being a future top four defenseman with a really unique profile and offering that elite physicality and mobility combination with a pretty decent defensive brain attached to that. I think it makes sense for New Jersey, and he continues to trend as a player that is drafted 10th overall. So that wraps up the show here for us today. I hope that you enjoyed listening. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, you can head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel make sure that you can build not only the most competitive, but the most sustainable fantasy hockey roster. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure to like, subscribe, leave us a comment down below with what you thought about the episode. Which players in the top 10 do you think have raised or lowered their stocks the most since draft day? And we're going to be continuing this series in the coming week, looking at the 11 to 20 range, as well as the 21 to 32 range. So look forward to that. But that wraps things up here for us today. I'm your host, Sebastian High. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to catch you listening again very soon.